Great. All right. I believe we are live. Thanks everyone for joining another episode of the OpenJS Foundation's Cross Project Council meeting. Today is the 17th of October, 2023. Drop the link here into the meeting notes. Yeah, again, folks, looks like everybody's added themselves, so thank you for that. Ben and I met, well, I guess let's before I get into that, let's do we have any announcements? Nothing?
Well, 2 weeks time, November 1st, we're doing OpenJS in finance with the FinTech Open Source Foundation that's in New York. I believe tickets are still available. If you go to the Linux Foundation events and look for the Finos organization. So we'll have some great speakers from OpenJS community.
Yep. Y'all can make it. See you there.
Yep.
Any other announcements? Board meeting is a week from Friday, I think, or this Friday.
It's actually on Monday. We're having the Linux Foundation Member Summit. So if you're on a board or if you're a Linux Foundation member, there is an event next week, a gathering. And so we're doing our board meeting on Monday.
Great. I assume there's no board meeting updates or board updates since you guys are meeting soon. So great. So we can get into the agenda. As I was saying before, Ben and I met to start to figure out, you know, the work happening on the community fund, the travel fund, and such. And we wanted to like kind of orient ourselves towards making progress and getting this wrapped up. So the plan is to kind of figure out what the goal is of the community fund, and then second, figure out what the strategy is. And then third, figure out what our tactics are. So right now we're at the goals phase, and the first item on the agenda is the issue talking about the goals of the community fund. And you know, we looked at what we wrote a couple, 2-3 years ago in the community fund repo, and tried to take in some of what people have been talking about and some of the things that Ben's been learning from legal and other areas of the foundation and such, to try and reconfigure our goal for the fund. So we opened the issue up, thought we'd maybe take, you know, maybe 10 minutes to kind of talk about that a bit. I feel like we could talk for hours probably about it. But since we have a big agenda, maybe we'll take a few minutes and try to time box it. So I don't know if everybody's had a chance to look at it. It's issue 1188. I'll drop it into the chat again here in case folks need it. Michael, I know you had a couple of comments there. I tried to address them, you know, not long before this meeting. Anybody want to jump in, or Ben, I don't know if you want to set some context around some of the changes we made or how we want to move forward.
It's pretty short, so I think folks can read it. And we can just discuss. And I think time boxing is a good idea. Yeah, we can just walk through it.
Okay. And when you say walk through it, do you want me to read it?
Before, yeah, I think before we sort of jump in on goals, just a quick note on diversity. The Linux Foundation will be changing the way it collects information and storing information on diversity. That doesn't mean the Linux Foundation and OpenJS are stopping our diversity goals. So for example, we have no all male panels. We have diverse speaker goals for our events. So diversity is still very much a part of how we operate and set goals. Just collecting and storing that information will be much more reduced from a risk perspective.
Yeah, and I see your question around that, Paula, in the issue.
So is that meant? It's basically we can't collect the information about diversity, equity, and inclusion, so that therefore why it's not one of the goals.
I think it should be a goal. I would say it should be definitely a goal. my personal opinion, should be a goal. But it just won't be as detailed. I think we've had in the past you identify as someone from an underrepresented community. I think we could probably still collect that on CFPs. The question is whether we store it in our databases is different. So, and we'll learn more about that, but overall, I think it would be a mistake personally to disregard diversity in our any activity we do. So.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think it's a miss that me and Joe didn't include that. So I think we should integrate that into the goal.
Yeah, I think in the past there was, and I could be misremembering, but I thought there were other sources of funding for that in addition to the travel fund.
No, we used to have, when we had our own hosted events that we sponsored and paid for, we had scholarships for folks who either couldn't afford it or were from diverse communities. But now that we're not hosting our own sort of OpenJS first party, we don't have that. The Linux Foundation does, and many other organizations do, and you can apply for that.
Yeah, and I think it's still a goal that we should have in mind in pretty much everything we do. I think that I think that in trying to focus what we want to use the community fund for, that was maybe part of the thinking that we should focus diversity, equity, and inclusion in its own sort of way. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's something that should be included in there as a bullet item. Maybe it should be included in the text as to how we kind of are looking at using the funds. I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah, I think like if we added like this fund support, we can wordsmith this, but like this fund supports travel, attendance at events, and something in there about an increasing diversity of events and activities related to OpenJS projects. I think that can be done without much issue. And I think it's also the right thing to do, like, you know, beyond it being not a big change. I think that's good to include.
Okay.
Diverse communities make better decisions. I think all the research has shown.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't think anybody like disagrees with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And in some areas we're trending great, like with our board, and some areas not so great, like Rich just pointed out the Node TSC. So we want to keep it all trending up.
Yeah, we had a good run for a bit of it moving in the right direction, but we've had some departures and have not. Yeah, I'm going to stop.
Okay, so we'll definitely make that change. Other comments here were about, is there a priority implied in the order of the list? And that is a no. And I did see, Joe, you edited the order, which I think is fine.
The one on standards, just reading through it again,
Yeah.
if we're going to be constrained, I might, think that we could narrow that a little bit to like on behalf of our projects, or as opposed to just general standards activity, like supporting standards activity that is requested by our projects, or I don't know what, but
yeah, I mean, we have a standards group and they, function in service of the foundation and the projects and such. And I think, in saying at events and activities directly related to OpenJS projects, technologies, or goals, we're trying to basically say what you're saying, Michael, like don't just go to some IoT event or something and try to get funding to affect something that maybe doesn't directly, and IoT is not good example, but
I guess where I was going from was like, say somebody who's never participated in the Node project says, hey, I want to go to participate in this standard that affects Node. I would prefer, if we're funding somebody who has participated in the Node project, to go do that versus somebody we don't like. Somebody who has some affiliation, some involvement in the project already is kind of where I was going at. Like, if we're going to have some limitations, again, it's sort of back to the supporting the work of our collaborators that are in our projects, right? In giving some preference to that is just what I was thinking for on that front.
Yeah,
What if they worked in the Jest project as an example, you know, and they're going to work on TC39, which would affect Node, you know, I don't know if there's really.
But
like,
just as a foundation project, so that would
Yeah, that's
fall
what I
into
mean.
that,
Yeah,
right? Like that I'm saying within the foundation scope, not like somebody. So somebody who hasn't been participating in any of the foundation projects come and says, hey, can you fund me to go somewhere?
yeah. I think,
Would
Mike,
that be within that scope or not, right?
I think you actually bring up a really good point. And I think that type of decision happens outside of the goal. In other words, like the idea behind the goal is to actually be pretty general, right? Because we don't want to if we start to put in essentially the things that would be in the rubric here, it's too much. But I think you're right. And I think it just belongs in a different place.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
I agree. I agree that one interesting caveat, and we need to have a better connection, is we did research with all the projects early on when the standards group was formed about, you know, what do you want the standards group to prioritize? And one thing we heard from a lot of the maintainers and the projects we met with is standards is something that happens to us, because we're not standards people who are working inside standards bodies and forecasting or having that sort of line of sight on what might happen to our project. So it's kind of a chicken and egg thing sometimes on, you know, where that sort of connection is made.
Yeah, but I agree with Ben too, like that's a
Okay.
decision we can
Put it
make.
aside as part of the agreed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And as a side note, the standards meeting happens after this meeting.
That's
Anyone
right.
involved.
Mhm.
Okay. And so, Ben, were you saying you think that should be called out somewhere else, or you think that should
I think so. I think once people start to figure out sort of like the more nuanced approval process, and what weight we give to certain things, I think that's an excellent thing that Michael brought up there.
I'm pretty sure we've had it in the who is eligible part in the past.
Yeah.
It's like
I think it might actually be
collaborator, an existing project, and if it's going to continue to be there, then I'm fine.
And I think we've got a question in the forum already that starts to ask about those questions. So I actually think we're covered with his concerns.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Cool. We're kind of at the time box here. Anybody else got something really pressing they want to bring up, or should we move on?
I just do think Emily's comment about why, like, speakers for OpenJS events not considered part of the budget's an interesting discussion, which can happen in the issue itself. But since we were discussing it, I think that is an interesting point.
That's so I wasn't sure if he was implying that the travel fund would be used to fund speakers at OpenJS events. I mean, like all speakers. Maybe you can elaborate, Michael, just so I understand.
Well, basically his comment is, why are the cost of speakers of OpenJS not considered part of the event's budget? And I think, you comment that you don't see where it says it is, but I get the sense that maybe we did use that to fund our speakers for the recent events. For example, I know that some of the ones which were sort of like directed as like already approved were speakers at the event, right? So I can get where he's coming from in terms of like, it kind of could seem like we had used it in that way in the past. And it's not a bad question to say, well, like, if we're going to plan an event, maybe we should plan to have the budget for people like the speakers we want at that event to be part of the part of the event budget versus coming out of the travel fund, right? And it comes back to the, if we're discussing the goals, is the goals to fund the speakers at our events, or is it something else, right? So like it's a valid discussion point, I think, in that context.
Yeah, and I see Paula. Paula mentions that speakers is new to the list, and so maybe that's where Emily got it from. So that makes sense, and I kind of
Yeah.
missed.
Yeah,
Kylie presented an event plan to y'all, was it 2 weeks ago? And part of the event budget was using a portion of that for speakers. Now, I think where you get into the fuzzy, is it a speaker for like a micro event we do like OpenJS World Europe, or is it a speaker, when it becomes a speaker at a collab summit, then does that become community? So again, there's a finite budget for the events and for travel funds. So you all just have to figure out how you want to shape that.
Yeah, we don't even know what our event plan is, so it's yeah, okay, cool. And I'll edit my comment now that I kind of understand where Emily's coming from, but I'll do that after. Anything else? Jump into the rest of the agenda. Cool. All right, good. And I encourage folks to still, comment on the issue and help us kind of get that squared away so we can move forward on the travel fund. Speaking of, the next issue on the agenda is revamping the travel fund. I don't think we need to get into this since I think we kind of have a plan. Let's figure out the goal, and then we'll start working through the strategy. Ben's already got a really great form built out that we can tailor once we kind of work through the goals, and then we can take some of these comments too to that as well. Cool. The next one is ask for additional travel budgets. We talked about this last week in the working session. I'm not sure, I think we walked away thinking, and Michael, you can feel free to chime in here, but that we can ask without having the other things in place. We can ask without having specific requests already coming in. So I think somebody just needs to kind of put that ask together, and it would need to happen within a week because the board meeting is on Monday.
Yeah, I mean, my suggestion, we just pick a number we think is somewhat reasonable, like we could pick 10K, right? Like, and make that ask. I don't think we have time to go through and like say, hey, we expect like, and come up with anything that's like a solid prediction of what we need. So like picking a number we think could allow us to have a few people travel if there's something that makes sense in the next couple months. Makes sense, and see what the feedback is, right? But so far we have the informal feedback that says, hey, there's no money, so maybe we'll just get a no. Great. But maybe it's like, well, that's too much, we could do this. Like, I don't know, right? Like I'm saying, I don't think we can personally think we can make a great prediction. So let's just pick something we think which isn't outlandish, make the ask and see how that goes.
Yep, that seems reasonable. Do we have a process for that, or do we just say the CPC would like to request $10,000 more for the travel budget to potentially cover any requests coming in through the end of the year?
Sarah and Mateo would make that request as part of their, section of the board meeting.
Okay. All right. Michael, would you mind just dropping a comment into that issue and tagging them and say this?
Yeah.
Is
So like, is 10,000 sound reasonable to everybody? I'll just put that in as we discuss. Let's make an ask of that amount, and I'll mention those two to make the request.
that seems reasonable to me. And then we'll see what they say. Could be a variety of responses. Yeah.
Right.
Great. All right, cool.
Thanks. Yep.
Of course. All right, so moving on. The next item is 1174, elections and transparency. Wes commented recently, but let me get a handle on what this is. So I think Ben we were talking about trying to figure out improvements to the elections, the process, and
Yeah.
and even I think I mean, I guess some of the roles have been sort of tweaked recently as well, so we kind of need to just maybe sit down and go through this.
Yeah, I think it's actually pretty straightforward. Like there's two elements of this issue. I think one is that Sarah wasn't aware of elections happening, so that the channels that we were using to publicize the elections didn't reach her. And I think part of that was a miss on my part. I didn't send stuff to the mailing list, right? I was communicating mostly in GitHub and Slack. So there's a couple tactical things we can do there. The other thing, or the other element of this is just simplifying how the elections happen. And I think we can use the model of the CPC board representative, how we do that, where we use a Google form and we communicate in GitHub. I think that worked pretty well. I think the ones where folks are instructed to contact you, for example, Joe, directly, that's probably the ones that we can try and optimize. So we'll just land on one process that works across the board. And in addition to that, we just need to sort a calendar for next year so that we can be proactive with people about knowing when terms end and know when the elections happen. So I think those are the three things to concentrate on. I don't think it's a Herculean task. And then we just adjust the CPC charter, which will require a vote to reflect those changes where needed.
Yeah,
Make
and I think
sense?
for sure.
Yeah.
And I think through all that work, there's a lot of cleanup and documentation, and probably even some things that shouldn't maybe be in the charter that can be more
Yeah.
in a process.
It was very confusing for me to figure out as someone running the elections for the first time. Like I basically had to deconstruct the charter into a document that I could understand. And so we can fix that. Like this shouldn't be obtuse, right? It should be very clear.
But is there another piece where you should talk about opening up the elections? Because right now it's the reps, the official reps for the projects, and the at-large folks who vote. So it's a small number. You'll see them on our website, right? Or do you take all regular members who are documented in GitHub? A regular member is if you attend regularly for a couple months, then you PR yourself in and you're accepted. So that's a much broader group. So
That's a good point.
I
Yeah.
was sort of thinking that was sort of the intent I was sort of reading into that issue. Because people are confused. It's a much smaller number.
Yeah, I think it even depends on what we're electing as to who can vote.
Yeah, I think we rarely have an election. It's more the board, right? In those designated seats outlined in the bylaws. So,
Yeah.
For the charter.
And I remember when we were merging the foundations, working, talking with Todd Moore, and when he brought up voting members, we had a long discussion about whether they were even needed, because we try to do consensus on everything. And his point was, if something really, really important needs to be voted on, you need people in place to vote on it. So, okay, yeah, well, we'll look at the whole picture when we do that work, and maybe Ben, you and I can find some time at some point soon.
Yeah, maybe after Member Summit.
Okay, sounds good.
That'd be great.
Cool.
The only bit of context I'll throw in that particular issue in particular is, in the past, we specifically broke out the two elections to be every 6 months so that there could be like handover from one board member to the other.
Yeah.
So that's just historical in the context of like, let's group them all back together.
Yeah, there's that, and I feel like there was something about like separating some of them, because you might want to run for one but not the other, and then if you don't make that one, then you would go for the next one or something. I can't remember exactly, but I feel like there was something like that as well. So when we look at this, we'll try to think through those things. We'll probably propose something, and folks can chime in as that comes through. Great. Excellent. So moving on. The next one is the Code of Conduct Action Plan. I don't think there's been any progress on this for the last few weeks. I know it's on Toby's radar, and he did a great job in putting together like this list of things that need to happen. If anybody wants to help move that forward, please, by all means, jump in there. I think we've been bogged down a little bit by the travel fund work and some other things. This is kind of stalled. So yeah, if you can help, great. Otherwise, we'll try to get this moving forward again soon. And it needs to, because it's hyper important. You know, the worst thing is when we are sort of in this limbo state and then the report comes through. So great. Next item on the agenda here is standardize on collab spaces over working groups. There's another to-do list here, which is in my comment, but I will give Toby credit. He again put together a great to-do list. I think we kind of just need to go through this. It may even be that some of this is already done, like courtesy board updates. And then we got to update documentation. So again, this is another one that if folks are able to help kind of move some of this forward, that would be great. You know, documentation and whatnot is always a task that we can use help on. Otherwise, I don't think there's really an update there. Next one on the agenda, I think Robin, you said you have an update on 1106, the nonviolent communication.
Yeah, I have sort of a general budget from Dr. Gloria Chance just through the LF. I can kind of go back. She gave a great discount, did not cap the number of attendees, but there is a hefty fee if we were to, for example, have the recorded information. I saw Wes was talking about opening it up. And of course, from a content training perspective, this is her consulting business. So I guess that it seems quite reasonable from a budget perspective. I liked her psychological safety. I think that's probably the closest what we all are looking for. So, you know, I can sort of put together and ask. The question is it for projects? I mean, how would you all like to define who this would be available for? What was Wes is in here? His comment was
Ben's original comment was it would be beneficial to offer this training again to projects moderation teams.
Maybe I saw a comment, oh, Wes, make it available to a larger group. Yeah, I have to say, when we did it, they're used to more interactive experience. We had a pretty good group attend from the LF. I think we probably had close to 200 people at once. There were a lot of people who were interacting in chat. So of course you can't have sort of if it was a smaller moderation, more people discussing and talking, but I still thought it was worthwhile. So.
Yeah, and Wes's comment does say to see if any other project leadership under the foundation wanted to attend.
Yeah.
Maybe not everybody, but yeah, projects moderation teams, other project leadership, but keep it scoped to, you know, folks within the foundation.
I would say it'd be about 100 max or 50. What do you think?
I'm not sure because it seems like you had experience in
well, I'm just saying, how many people would that be, do you think? Because I mean, I do know we have a lot of single code of conduct committees with some of our smaller projects.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be great if there was 100 people there, but I know, but suspect that's
it's probably closer to 50, maybe, right?
Maybe even 20 or 30.
Okay.
But that's just a wild guess in terms of like, you know, people sign up for things and then they don't go, you know.
Yeah, would this extend to something like as wide as like Fastify contributors or whatnot? Or like, is that kind of like the scoping of who'd be invited?
I sort of wonder if you end up, well, as long as it's more direct communication, I think if you open it up to sort of the general public, then it becomes a whole different thing from her consulting business, right?
It's like she's like hosting her own little mini summit if that many people are open to it. But I guess like,
yeah,
strictly saying like you must be a maintainer of a project or have like be a part of a maintainer team on a project. And then like I know at least with Fastify's, they have like internal, the GitHub org chats. So you could like make posts and those kinds of things. And like Electron has their Slack channel. I'm sure you could like make a post there. But then there's of course it's like, yeah, like with Fastify, most of those folks are working on that like not as a direct function of their job day to day, but then Electron, like a majority of those maintainers, they've got like huge corporate backing who could probably have the same experience in a different way. So it's, yeah, we can open it up to all. Be interesting who would be interested in attending
Core
it.
maintainers, kind of essentially,
Mhm.
TSC/core maintainers.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I mean, I wonder if you kind of do it in like concentric circles where you like first reach out to the leadership, and the folks who are maintaining and the moderation teams, see how many people you get signed up, and then expand it a little bit more, but maybe have a limit. And I was wondering, maybe 100 is too many in a group. But say whatever it is, so say 60, maybe you actually cap it at 50, but you have a buffer of 10 for like if somebody from Marco JS is like, oh my God, I wanted to do this and you're already full, you can kind of get a couple of the key people if they missed it for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Anyway, so it's great. It seems like we have an option here.
Yeah.
Just figure
I
out
do
what the
think- Yep.
details are.
I just
which is
needed
the-
to sort of get a sense of the scale. So I
Yeah.
can put together, yeah.
Okay, cool. Michael?
Yeah, I think it like would be really good is to actually do something that's regular. So like if we said we want to run this every 6 months and we have X amount of seats, and then I think your idea, Joe, of like the concentric circles of like, hey, it's really great if we can get the moderation people in there as the first priority and then leadership but like I think having it something that where we plan it so it happens multiple times rather than like, hey, like 5 years later, it's like, hey, this is a good idea, right? Like I think it's just,
Yeah, I think from a budget perspective, we could afford it once a year.
sure,
unless
once a
we-
year.
Yeah, unless potential members out there, if you're on the fence and want to join, you up.
Yeah,
Is it something like there's a fixed cost per time? Like, so instead of
Yeah,
doing
yeah.
it twice with a smaller number,
Yeah,
it's cheaper to do it once, right?
yeah. And being a nonprofit, I know that she did give a really healthy discount to the LF, so.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, but so anyway, whatever the
still, yeah,
interval
yeah,
is,
yeah.
having it something where it's like, yeah, we do this every year because it's important and here's,
Yeah.
like you said, have it budgeted in.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that sounds great if that's something we can do. And then if it is on a yearly basis and it's in the budget, then that's just, what it is. Okay. All right, great. Well, we'll check back with you soon, Robin, in 2 weeks or something, and we'll see how things take shape. Thank you. Great. So the next ones, are these all waiting on legal? Yeah, enable.
I have a legal update. I took all of our legal issues and summarized them all for our legal counsel. And a majority of them, he said, well, I could spend a lot of my expensive time on this, but the Linux Foundation has already developed best practices around each of these. So I have 3 in-house attorneys at the LF that I'm going to circle with and on each one and find out what's the best practice instead of using it for all the legal, or well, we're already over our legal budget, but to go through that and figure out best practices. So I will work
Okay.
on that.
All right, great. Hopefully,
Yeah.
hopefully it doesn't take too much time and money.
Mhm.
So that covers like 4 issues, I think there, which I think brings us just to the last issue on the agenda, which is the create some documentation webpage, describe collaboration model of OpenJS projects. I think Robin, you and Mateo were working on something.
Yeah, we have a draft that's with our comms team and I'd say it's about 80% there.
Great.
And then I think what we'd like to do is post as a blog and then post it on our website as well. So we're
Great.
close.
Yeah, and I imagine it's something that could be used even for like talks and stuff, you know, or at
Yeah,
least help build out something like that. Because I was surprised at some of the comments on Twitter recently about you know,
Yeah.
some other controversy stuff, but people just didn't understand how foundations work and like
Yeah.
where money goes and all that stuff. I was like, wow.
And it was actually, I did pull from a lot of our talks that we do, but you know, that doesn't scale. So, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So amazingly, because I was worried we were going to run out of time. We're at the end of the agenda and we've got 18 minutes left. We should talk about the next working session and what people want to work on there. Obviously, the travel fund is topical right now, but also, you know, code of conduct stuff I think would be great to move forward, and election stuff would be good too. Does anybody have any strong opinions on any of those? I guess, Ben, do you think that working on the travel fund would be a good idea in terms of the work, like the current state of things? Got a week to.
I'm just thinking about how to make that session productive and have a good outcome. I think maybe if we try to get consensus on the form, that would be super helpful, because that sort of unblocks me from like doing a bunch of other stuff. So maybe that would be worthwhile.
Okay.
Is there like, how can maybe I can ask some advice, like how can I push that through? Like, is general consensus good enough? Should there be a formal vote? Is it the chair that will ultimately decide? Like, it's kind of.
I think general consensus.
Okay.
You know? So, you know, once we kind of feel like we've got the goal in place, we can focus on the form and any other related stuff. You know, PRs are always good, but I know this might be hard to PR exactly. Michael?
Yeah, we have to sort of get
think,
consensus. Sorry, go ahead, Michael.
Like, I think just here's a proposal, and then people don't object, then there you go, right? Like,
Okay.
that's the way it happens. I think in this case, like, the form to me doesn't seem potentially all that controversial. The rubric is the part that I think is going to have a lot of discussion, right?
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
Okay.
And again,
So maybe we'll work on both.
I would still like, even for that one, like, just put a proposal, like, if it was you, here's what you would say it should be, right? And that will start all sorts of conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. Okay.
So, okay. Well, I'd be happy to talk with you more about that, Ben, and figure out a plan for the working session. We can.
Yeah, it sounds like maybe we can do like a wet clay rubric that will give folks something to react to.
Yep, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like making rubrics. We can do that.
Okay, great. Love it. Cool. All right. So we'll plan on working on that. And then, you know, if for whatever reason we have extra time, we'll look at one of the other two things that are kind of outstanding.
Actually,
yeah, Ben.
Next week, that working session it's members summit next week.
Okay.
I don't know what's happening at that specific time of day. If it's something I can skip to attend the working session or not. So let me poke around and get back to you.
Yeah, and with that in mind, I mean, maybe even the form and the rubric could be, you know, either a Google Doc again, since that's a little bit easier to comment specifically on. And we could do that async, and we could, you know, potentially this could maybe be a fallback. I'm not sure if we want to, you know, which will be the primary and which is the fallback, but we could have just sort of a working session free form, and people can, you know, join and work on things. I would love to just sit down and look at the code of conduct stuff and try to figure out where it's at, and if it's, you know, documentation and stuff, work on that. So yeah, there are a few important things that would be great to move forward. Divide and conquer would be awesome, but well, I guess let's just see what the schedule looks like, and we'll maybe make a decision later this week and mention it in Slack.
Yeah, I think that works.
Okay, I have one little announcement I didn't announce, but we did launch a community contest for a Node.js mascot this
Oh,
week.
yeah, I
Um,
forgot about that.
We put in some guidelines, and we're not seeing folks follow a lot of those, namely the AI one. And let me explain why we don't like AI images. Like if y'all can't embroider it easily on a hat and recognize it, silk screen, it's probably not going to have sort of the long-term longevity. So if you know great graphic designers, or if you're a great graphic designer, just sort of think about that. And go check out LinkedIn and Twitter on the Node.js social channels. But it's been kind of fun to see.
There's been some real funny ones come through.
I know,
Twitter is full of some
I know.
gems.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing, just from a graphic design brand perspective, is we don't want you to take the Node.js Hex logo and modify it and adapt it. That sort of breaks best practices from a marketing and branding perspective. So something that, reflects it, but is not messing with it. Or so as I think Kylie, our marketing lead, put in the thing that's separate from the logo. So.
Right.
But bring it.
I designed these cool stickers.
Those are cool, Joe, your new band.
Yeah. Always jumping in to promote. Cool. Anything else before we wrap up? If not, I appreciate everybody's time. This was a good session. Let's keep progress on the travel fund and on the other initiatives as well. Anywhere you can chip in is greatly appreciated. There's been a lot less activity lately, so please help. Cool. Otherwise, I'll see you in Slack. I'll see you in future meetings. Maybe I'll see you in the standards meeting, and we'll just see you around. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.